Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Now we'll be discussing about a very important structure, a very important sense organ, that is eye. As we are going with ncert audible series, understanding each and every line, understanding the concept behind it, but this is not just enough for cracking NEET. We need to know what type of questions NTA is framing from ncert. And another thing we need to know is uh, how previous year questions are playing important role, how this ncrt series and pyq audible series can help you to increase your score. So let's begin it. I'm going to um, uh, continue this ncrt audible series and get a new series, that is previous year questions, so that we can understand how previous year questions, um, we can understand how ncrt plays an important role, how this ncrt series has played important role in understanding the concepts. So let's see. Our paired eyes are located in the sockets of the skull called orbits. A brief account of structures and functions of the human eye is given in the following sections. Parts of an eye. The adult human eyeball is nearly a spherical structure. The wall of the eyeball is composed of three layers. The external layer is composed of dense connective tissue and is called sclera. The anterior portion of this layer is called the cornea. The middle layer, choroid, contains many blood vessels and looks bluish in color. The choroid layer is thin over the posterior two-thirds of the eyeball, but it becomes thick in the anterior part to form a ciliary body. Right. The ciliary body itself continues forward to form a pigmented and opaque structure called the iris, which is visible colored portion of the eye. The eyeball contains a transparent crystalline lens which is held in place by ligaments attached to the ciliary body. In front of the lens, the aperture surrounded by the iris is called the pupil. The diameter of the pupil is regulated by the muscle fibers of the iris. Sometimes the frame the diameter of the pupil is regulated by the muscle of the iris, or sometimes they give identify the incorrect statement, and one statement will give like the diameter of the pupil is regulated by the muscle fibers of ciliary body. So is it correct? It should be a ciliary body or muscles of fibers of the iris. So you should be very careful. The diameter of the pupil is controlled, is regulated by the muscle fibers of the iris, not ciliary body. Ciliary body, uh, it it have ligaments. This ligaments uh, hold the crystalline lens and help it to hold it in position, and these ligaments are attached to the ciliary body. In front of the lens, the aperture surrounded by the iris is called the pupil. Now let's come to the important point where we do mistake, that is the inner layer is the retina. The inner layer is the retina. What is retina? Retina is a colored portion, visible colored portion of the eye. Sorry, what is retina? That was iris, right? So you have to read the statements properly. Whether they are asking what structure they are asking, sometimes they give this statement very correctly that you will not you will not get any speculation, and you will take it as it is correct. So you have to be careful whether it is asking right option or wrong option, right statement or wrong statement. The inner layer is the retina. So what is retina? Retina is the membrane like in which the image of the eye is formed. It's like a screen. So the image is formed on the retina. So the inner layer is the retina, and it contains three layers of neural cells. How many layers? Three layers, from inside to outside. What is the inside? Ganglion, then bipolar cells and photoreceptor cells. So here I will be giving trick how to remember this. So inside to outside, that is ganglion, bipolar cells, photoreceptor cells. Now let's talk about outside to inside. So outside, as the light is falling on the eye, there should be some receptors which can catch the light. It can which can sense the presence of light. So there are cells that are called photoreceptor cells. The outermost cells are photoreceptor cells. In the third layer, talking about third layer, that is retina, it is having three cells, that is photoreceptor cells, bipolar cells. So bipolar cells, they are present at the middle. So at one side they have to connect with photoreceptor cells, and in the other side they have to connect with ganglion cells. Ganglion cells are nothing but a part of the neurons, so neurons have to connect the information. So photoreceptor cells have sensed whether the light is present or not, what type of light is present, everything. And bipolar cells, they are present in the middle, connecting to photoreceptor cells and ganglion cells. Ganglion cells take it the impulse and pass it to it. Okay, there are two types of photoreceptor cells. Talking about photoreceptor cells, there are two types. One is called rods, one is called cones. These cells contain the light sensitive proteins called photopigments. What are photopigments? They are light sensitive proteins. They are light sensitive or insensitive? Sensitive. They have to sense the presence of light. What our eye does, it senses the presence of light. It identifies the color, it identifies the what is present, what object is present. The image is formed on the retina. Retina is made up of 3 layers. From inside to outside, if we talk about ganglion cells, bipolar cells, and then photoreceptor cells, there are two types of photoreceptor cells, rods and cones. These cells contain the photosensitive proteins that are called photopigments. Okay, the daylight, photopic vision, and color vision are functions of cones. So what are the functions of cones? Daylight, photopic vision and color vision are the functions of cones. And the twilight, scotopic vision, is the function of rods. What is the function of rods? Scotopic or twilight vision. The rods contain a purplish red protein called the rhodopsin. So rods contain red protein, are red, and rhodopsin or visual purple. So this protein is also called visual purple, as it is purple in color, which contains a derivative of vitamin A. So vitamin A is the rhodopsin is the derivative of vitamin A. Visual purple is the derivative of vitamin A. In human eye, there are 3 types of cones which possess their own characteristic photopigments that respond to. So rod is having a purplish red protein, that is rhodopsin, which is a derivative of vitamin A. But what about cones? So cones have 3 types of cones which possess their own characteristic photopigments that respond to red, green, and blue lights. The sensation of different colors are produced by various combination of these cones and the photopigments. When these cones are stimulated equally, a sensation of white light is produced. A sensation of which light? A sensation of white light is produced. So see, first thing, retina. Retina is the innermost layer. Talking about eye, there are 3 layers. The outermost is the sclera. Okay, the outermost layer is the sclera, and in the interior portion of the eye, sclera forms a structure that is called cornea, right? Cornea, which is transparent, and then this middle layer is the choroid, and the posterior 2/3 part of the choroid is thin, and the anterior portion, it becomes thick and forms ciliary body. Then later, talking about after ciliary body, there are other structures like ligaments attached to the ciliary body. It holds the lens in place, and we have a transparent crystalline lens, that is biconvex lens, and there's a visible colored portion of the eye, which is pigmented and it is opaque, and that is called iris. So iris is the opaque pigmented structure, and it has a aperture. So the aperture surrounded by the iris is called the pupil. So pupil is the aperture. The diameter of the pupil is regulated by the muscle fibers of iris. Muscle fiber of iris the iris. The inner layer is the retina. The inner layer is the retina. It contains 3 layers of neural cells from inside to outside, or outside to inside. If we talk about from inside to outside, ganglion cells, bipolar cells, photoreceptor cells. Outside to inside, photoreceptor cells, bipolar cells, ganglion cells. So there are two types of photoreceptor cells, that are rods and cones. Rods have a red purplish protein called uh, visual purple or rhodopsin, which is the derivative of vitamin A. Rods are responsible for twilight or scotopic vision. Cones are responsible for daylight or photopic vision. Uh, Talking about cones, so there are three types of cones which possess their own characteristic photopigments uh, that respond to red, green, and blue lights. The sensations of different colors are produced by various combinations of these cones and the photopigments. When these cones are stimulated equally, a sensation of white light is produced. A sensation of white light is produced. So when all these cones, the sensations of different colors are produced by various combination of these cones and the photopigments. And then when these cones are stimulated equally, a sensation of white light is produced. So cones, the three types of cones, what are the? Red, green, blue. Red, green, blue. So you have to remember a code GBR. Okay, GBR. So GBR, you can remember green, red, and blue. So there's a disease, color blindness, in which red and green cones do not function properly. Red and green, so people cannot differentiate between red and green color. Okay, so let's talk about now optic nerves. And cones are responsible for daylight vision, or also called photopic vision, color vision, right? The optic nerves, see, if we go like to understand कि rods का vision कैसा होता है, cones का कैसा होता है. Rods मतलब जो आप रातों में देखते हो, but to understand it more properly, जैसे कि आप black and white movie देख रहे हो, that is rods. तो rods ऐसे विजन दिखाता है जहाँ पे आपको कलर पता नहीं चलता, ब्लैक एंड वाइट मूवी. बट कलर्ड, जो ये ज़माने में मूवी चल रही है, वो क्या है? कलर्ड मूवी है, HD मूवी है ना, HD मूवी. सो दिस इज बिकॉज ऑफ हाउ कैन यू सी, लाइक cones functions as HD present movie and rods function as black and white old movie, right? तो ऐसे दिखता है. ओके, जस्ट टू गेट एन आइडिया. सो आपको समझ में आएंगे ना. तो कॉन्स कितने टाइप्स के? 3 टाइप के. GBR, green, blue, and red. Talking about optic nerves leaves the eye, and the retinal blood vessels enter it at a point medial to and slightly above the posterior pole of the eyeball. Photoreceptor cells are not present in that region, and hence it is called a blind spot. So the optic nerves leave the eye, and the retinal blood vessels enter it at a point medial to the posterior pole of the eyeball and slightly above the posterior pole of the eyeball. Now this retinal blood vessel, the point, I think you got that. So photoreceptor cells, these cells are not present in that region, and hence it is called the blind spot. So where the optic nerve is leaving and the retinal blood vessels enter, this region is slightly above the posterior pole of the eye and median to the posterior pole of the eye. So photoreceptor cells are not present in that region, and hence it is called blind spot. Nothing is visible at that portion. So at the posterior pole of the eye, lateral to the blind spot, there is a yellowish pigmented spot called macula lutea. So macula lutea is a Latin word which means yellow spot. So at the posterior pole of the eye, lateral to the blind spot, there is a yellowish pigmented spot called macula lutea with a central pit called fovea. So there is a pit in that is called fovea. The fovea is a thinned out portion of the retina. What is fovea? Fovea is a thinned out portion of the retina where only cones are densely packed. At this point where visual activity, means resolution, is maximum, resolution is greatest. So talking about fovea. So fovea is that portion where you require greatest resolution. So whenever you require greatest resolution, you use your fovea. So what is a fovea? Actually, the posterior pole of the eye, lateral to the blind spot, there's a yellowish pigmented spot of the eye, lateral to the blind spot. So lateral to the blind spot, you have a yellowish pigmented spot that is called macula lutea, which is having a central pit that is called fovea. Fovea is thinned out portion of the retina where only cones are densely packed. It is the point where the visual activity resolution is maximum. So fovea is having maximum resolution. Resolution means clarity where maximum clarity is present at the fovea, because there are lots of cones are present, densely packed cones are there, but there are no rods. So ncert is saying that only the cones are densely packed. So fovea is the thinned out portion of the retina. This is the central pit of the macula with a central pit called fovea. So there is a central pit on the macula lutea. Now let's talk about the space between the cornea and the lens is called aqueous chamber. So the space between lens and cornea means that's the outer portion that is aqueous and contains a thin watery fluid called aqueous humor. The space between the lens and the retina is called the vitreous chamber and is filled with transparent gel called vitreous humor. So vitreous humor is gel like transparent gel and aqueous humor is thin watery fluid. So thin watery fluid जो आपका होता है aqueous humor है, और जो transparent gel है वो vitreous humor है. Vitreous humor is between lens and retina. Now let's talk about mechanism of vision. So the light rays in visible wavelength focused on the retina to the cornea and lens generate potential impulses in rods and cones. As mentioned earlier, the photosensitive compounds, photopigments in the human eyes is composed of opsin, a protein, and retinal and aldehyde of vitamin A. So mechanism of vision. The light rays in visible wavelength focused on retina to the cornea and lens generate potential impulses in rods and cones. So guys, look at it properly. Light rays in visible wavelength focused on retina through cornea and lens. The light rays in mechanism देख रहे हैं, mechanism of vision. The light rays in visible wavelength focused on the retina through the cornea and lens generate potential impulses in rods and cones. As mentioned earlier, the photosensitive compounds, photopigments in the human eye is composed of opsin. Opsin is a protein and retinal is an aldehyde of vitamin A. Al है ना, retinal, al means aldehyde. So retinal is aldehyde of vitamin A. Sometimes the famous question like retinal is an alcohol, retinal is an aldehyde. So retinal is a derivative of alcohol, retinal is a derivative of aldehyde, retinal is a derivative of an acid, or retinal is a derivative of cyanide, or what. So you have to write it like retinal is a derivative of aldehyde. So Al से आल से पता चला कि वो aldehyde का derivative है. Opsin is a protein, right? Light induces dissociation of the retinal from opsin, resulting in changes in the structure of the opsin. This causes membrane permeability changes. As a result, the potential differences are generated in the photoreceptor cells. This produces a signal that generates action potentials in the ganglion cells through the bipolar cells. These action potential impulses are transmitted by optic nerves to the visual cortex area of the brain, where the neural impulses are analyzed and the image formed on the retina is recognized based on earlier memory and experience. So, if you notice, light induces dissociation of the retinal from opsin. Right, light induces dissociation of retinal from opsin. So light है वो क्या induce करता है? Dissociation of retinal from opsin. So light induces dissociation of retinal from opsin, resulting in changes in the structure of opsin. This causes membrane permeability changes. As a result, potential differences are generated in photoreceptor cells. This produces a signal that generates action potentials in the ganglion cells, through the bipolar cells. So as a result, potential differences are generated in the photoreceptor cells, which produces a signal that generates action potentials in the ganglion cells. to the bipolar cells. This action potential impulses are transmitted by optic nerves to the visual cortex area of the brain, where the neural impulses are analyzed and image formed on the retina is recognized based on earlier memory and experience. So one thing you need to remember is the light rays of visible wavelength only can be focused on the eye. I mean to say that we can see only in visible wavelength only, not in less than visible wavelength or more than visible wavelength we cannot see. So the light rays in visible wavelength focused on the retina through the cornea and lens generate potentials means impulses in rods and cones. As mentioned earlier, the photosensitive compounds जो photopigments होते हैं, the human eye is composed of opsin. Opsin क्या होता है? Opsin एक प्रोटीन है. क्या है opsin? एक प्रोटीन है. Retinal is an aldehyde of vitamin A. Light induces dissociation of retinal from opsin, resulting in changes in the structure of the opsin. This causes membrane permeability changes. As a result, potential differences are generated in the photoreceptor cells. So होता क्या है? ऐसा होता है कि जो आपका सेल मेम्ब्रेन है इसका परमेबिलिटी चेंज हो रहा है ना. सेल मेम्ब्रेन का परमेबिलिटी चेंज हो रहा है क्योंकि विजिबल लाइट पड़ी है. तो फोटोसेंसिटिव कंपाउंड्स जो फोटोपिगमेंट्स हैं इन द ह्यूमन आई ऑप्सिन क्या करते हैं? फोटोसेंसिटिव कंपाउंड्स मीन्स फोटोपिगमेंट्स इन द ह्यूमन आईज इज कंपोज्ड ऑफ ऑप्सिन. ऑप्सिन क्या है? एक प्रोटीन है. And retinal, an aldehyde of vitamin A. Light induces dissociation of the retinal from opsin. So light पड़ने से क्या हुआ? रेटिनाल और ऑप्सिन एक दूसरे से जुदा हो गए, एक दूसरे से अलग हो गए. रेटिनाल एंड ऑप्सिन, ऑप्सिन का स्ट्रक्चर बदल गया, उसका रूप बदल गया. दिस कॉल्स membrane permeability changes. As a result, potential differences are generated in the photoreceptor cells. Photoreceptor cells में क्या हुआ? Potentials generate हुए, है ना. As a result of potential differences generated in the photoreceptor cells, this produces a signal that generates action potentials in the ganglion cells to the bipolar cells. These action potentials in the ganglion cells to the bipolar cells. The action potential impulses are transmitted by optic nerves to the visual cortex area of the brain. तो हुआ क्या? समझ में आ रहा है ना? Of the brain, where the neural impulses are analyzed and the image formed on the retina is recognized based on earlier memory and experience. So based on earlier memory, जैसे कि रेड कलर कैसा रहता है, ब्लू, पिंक, येलो, ब्लैक, ऑरेंज, वाइट ना, तो इससे अर्लियर मेमोरी एक्सपीरियंस से हमें पता चल जाता है. तो पहले क्या हुआ? विजिबल वेवलेंथ रेटिना पर फोकस हुई. कैसे? डायरेक्ट नहीं, कॉर्निया से निकली, फिर लेंस में आई, फिर रेटिना तक पहुंची. इससे क्या हुआ? जनरेट इम्पल्स, पोटेंशियल इम्पल्सेस इन रॉड्स एंड कोन्स. एज ए रिजल्ट अर्लियर द फोटो सेंसिटिव कंपाउंड्स जो हैं, फोटोपिगमेंट्स जो हैं, फोटो सेंसिटिव कंपाउंड्स मतलब फोटोपिगमेंट्स इन द human eye is composed of opsin of the retinal. From the opsin resulting in changes in structure of the opsin cause membrane permeability changes. As a result, potential differences are generated in the photoreceptor cells. है ना. तो पोटेंशियल डिफरेंसेस जनरेट हुए तो क्या हुआ? सिग्नल प्रोड्यूस हुआ, एक्शन पोटेंशियल्स पहुँचे ganglion cells to the bipolar cells. So these action potential impulses are transmitted to the optic nerves by the visual cortex. सो विजुअल कॉर्टेक्स में क्या दिखता है, सब, है ना। और क्या होता है कि जो भी आपका इम्पल्स है, न्यूरल इम्पल्स, ये एनालाइज हो जाता है एंड द इमेज फॉर्म्ड इज सिनोटिस। सो जो रेटिना है उसके ऊपर बन गया। सो गाइस, ये आई का डिटेल एनसीईआरटी लाइन बाय लाइन हो गया है, तो नेक्स्ट वीडियो में हम ये करेंगे। सो टिल देन, बाय, थैंक यू सो मच एंड शेयर दिस वीडियो विथ योर फ्रेंड्स।